You were going too fast. Here's your ticket.
Officer, I was driving the speed limit.
Tell it to the judge. Now sign. I told you not to resist.
Request.
You're coming with me.
Rain slicked the asphalt, reflecting red and blue lights across the deserted intersection. Marcus Hale eased his black sedan to the curb, the wipers struggling against the downpour. He had just finished a late meeting at the Capitol, his briefcase still open on the passenger seat, a folder of state reforms marked with his name, Governor Marcus Hale. A spotlight burned through the driver's window. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer barked, hand already hovering near his holster. Marcus froze, confusion flickering through exhaustion. "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was even practiced, the tone of a man who had spent his life controlling rooms full of men like this one. "Out, now." Rain pounded harder. The officer's flashlight darted to Marcus's hands, his face, the expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. "Nice car. Stolen, I bet." Marcus's pulse quickened. He could feel the absurdity press against his ribs, the way his education, his title, his calm meant nothing here. Slowly, he placed both hands on the window edge. "You're making a mistake." The officer leaned in, sneer twisting. "Only mistake I see is you thinking you belong in this neighborhood." The words cut sharper than the rain. Somewhere behind them, thunder cracked, the universe echoing the insult. A second patrol car arrived. Another flashlight, another order. Marcus stepped out, soaked, his suit darkened to shadow. The officer grabbed his arm, shoved him against the hood. Papers spilled from his briefcase, caught in the wind, State of Georgia letterhead. A folded newspaper clipping fluttered across the street. Marcus Hale elected as governor. The officer's eyes followed it. For a moment, the night held its breath. Then, silence, and Marcus whispered, "Now do you see me?" Rain turned the city into a blur of glass and thunder. Marcus Hale's sedan sliced through the downpour, wipers dragging across the windshield in a rhythmic groan. He was exhausted, a 14-hour day of budget meetings, phone calls, and the relentless hum of governance. The city lights thinned as he entered the outskirts, where old warehouses slumped beside cracked pavement. Blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Marcus's foot lifted from the pedal, confusion flickering. He wasn't speeding. No signal missed. No turn illegal. He eased the car to the curb and watched the reflection of the police cruiser distort in the rain. He lowered the window halfway. The beam of a flashlight stabbed into his eyes. License and registration. The officer's tone was clipped, devoid of courtesy. Marcus blinked through the glare. "Of course, officer." He reached slowly for his wallet. Years of protocol lived in his muscle memory. Deliberate, visible. .com. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus froze, both hands open on the steering wheel. His voice stayed level. "You asked for my license." The officer stepped closer, rain slicking the brim of his hat. "Yeah, I did. Now I'm asking why a guy like you's driving this kind of car at midnight." Marcus inhaled. The tone wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion wrapped in authority. "This car belongs to me." "Sure it does." The flashlight swept the interior leather seats, laptop bag, the faint scent of expensive cologne from across the street. A curtain shifted, a bystander peeking through. Marcus noticed. Someone always watched, but rarely intervened. "Step out of the vehicle, may I ask?" "I said out." Marcus opened the door, water rushing in over his shoes. His tailored suit clung to him, the chill biting into his skin. The officer badge reading D. Lang circled him. "Turn around. Am I being detained?" Lang's lips curled. "You're being investigated. For what?" Lang didn't answer. He patted Marcus down, rough and impersonal. When Marcus turned slightly to speak, Lang shoved him against the car hood. "Keep your hands there." Marcus's voice thinned with anger. "Officer Lang, you're making a mistake." Lang laughed, a sound that cut through the rain. "The only mistake is you thinking you're above the law." The flash of a phone camera came from somewhere nearby. A teenage voice whispered, "Yo, he's recording this." Lang turned his head sharply. "Put that phone down." But the recording continued. Marcus could feel the shift the moment authority met exposure. He stayed silent, breathing slow, waiting for Lang to notice the papers spilling from his briefcase. Lang grabbed one. The paper bore the state seal and Marcus's printed name, Governor Marcus Hale. Lang froze. His expression faltered, confusion replacing arrogance. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" Marcus turned his head slightly, voice steady. "That's my job title." Lang blinked, disbelief curdling into panic. You expect me to believe? The other officer approached, scanning the document. His eyes widened. Lang, that's him. That's the governor. Rain hammered down like applause. The tension thickened, humiliation flipping direction. Lang's mouth opened, then shut. Marcus straightened slowly, reclaiming his dignity 1 inch at a time. Now, he said, let's talk about the law. The camera phone captured everything, the lights, the silence, the sudden shift of power. And in that frozen second, Marcus knew this was no longer just a traffic stop. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The precinct reeked of disinfectant and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bleaching the room in harsh white. Marcus Hale sat on a metal bench inside the holding cell, soaked, cuffed, his reflection warped in the scratched glass panel. An officer passed by, glancing in. You, the one pretending to be the governor. His tone was half amusement, half disbelief. Marcus didn't look up. No pretense. Just waiting for someone competent enough to confirm it. The officer snorted, tossing a cup of instant noodles into the trash. Sure thing, Your Excellency. Laughter echoed from down the corridor. 3 officers clustered near the desk, their conversation sharp enough for Marcus to hear. Claims he's the governor. Yep. And I'm the president. Lang's in deep this time. Marcus closed his eyes. The words rolled over him like static. Years of public service had trained him to hear insults without absorbing them. But this was different. This was the stripping of identity. Not disagreement over policy. His wrists throbbed where the cuffs dug into skin. A heavy door clanged open. Officer Lang entered, his uniform slightly damp, his jaw tight. He avoided Marcus's gaze, heading straight for the sergeant's desk. Can we verify his ID yet? Lang asked. The desk sergeant, an older man with a gut hanging over his belt, shrugged. No wallet, no phone, just papers. We're running checks. Lang's voice dropped. He said he's Marcus Hale. Yeah, and I said I'm Elvis. Relax. Marcus leaned forward. Sergeant, he said, calm but cutting, you could verify my identity by making one call to the governor's office. Area code 404, extension 221. The sergeant didn't even glance at him. Sit back, sir. The word sir was soaked in mockery. Lang shifted, restless. What if he's not lying? Then we'll deal with it when the damn phone rings. The sergeant replied. Marcus studied Lang's face, the growing crack in his composure, the nervous twitch near his jaw. He recognized it. Guilt, laced with fear, but pride held it together. 2 hours crawled by. The clock's tick cut the silence. The TV above the desk played muted news highlights, weather alerts, local sports. A grainy political ad featuring Governor Marcus Hale's campaign slogan, Justice starts with accountability. Lang noticed. His throat tightened. He reached for the remote and changed the channel. Marcus almost smiled. The irony didn't need words. Footsteps thundered down the hall. A younger officer burst in, phone in hand. Chief wants to see you now. Lang followed, jaw tight. Minutes later, voices rose behind closed doors. Marcus couldn't make out words, but tone carried everything. The low growl of reprimand, the quick tempo of panic. The sergeant's phone rang. He answered, nodded, eyes flicking toward the holding cell. Then, a pause, a sharp intake of breath. He stood abruptly. Open it. The lock clicked. Lang returned, face pale, avoiding eye contact. Governor Hale, the sergeant said, voice suddenly stiffed with respect. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Marcus didn't move. That's one way to put it. Your staff is on the way. We apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience. The word left his mouth quietly, but the tone carried weight. The other officers stilled. Lang stammered. Sir, I didn't. I thought. Marcus rose, straightened his drenched jacket. You thought my skin defined my status. No one spoke. The hum of fluorescent light filled the space where excuses died. Lang tried again, softer. Sir, it wasn't personal. It never is, Marcus said. That's the problem. The cell door swung fully open. He walked past them, each step deliberate, eyes forward. The silence followed him. Not respect, not remorse, just the heavy realization of power, reversed. At the front desk, an aide rushed in, breathless. Governor, we've been calling everywhere. Are you all right? Marcus nodded once. Physically, the aide glanced at the officers, disgust sharp on his face. They'll pay for this. Marcus stopped him with a look. No, they'll answer for this. He turned toward the door, the night air cold and clean against his face. Reporters had already begun to gather beyond the yellow tape, their flashes slicing the dark. A voice shouted, Governor Hale, is it true you were arrested tonight? He didn't answer. Not yet. His silence was the story now. The truth would arrive later, measured, devastating. As the car door closed behind him, the precinct lights blurred through the rain again. The same city, the same road, but something fundamental had shifted. Inside, Officer Lang sat alone in the interrogation room, staring at the governor's photo on his phone screen. The same face he'd shoved against the hood of a car, his reflection warped in the glass. Twin images overlapping, authority and consequence. The realization came like a slow, suffocating tide. He whispered to no one, "What have I done?" Outside, thunder rolled again, low, inevitable, unanswerable. The morning broke with chaos. By sunrise, Marcus Hale's name was no longer a headline. It was a reckoning. News anchors spoke with urgent disbelief. Footage emerging overnight appears to show Governor Marcus Hale being detained by local police. Clips rolled on every channel. The rain-soaked street, flashing lights, the officer's sneer, Marcus's steady composure. A teenager's trembling voice from behind the camera whispered, "That's the governor, man." Before the video cut to static. By 8 a.m., it had been shared 3 million times. In the governor's mansion, aides scurried between phones and screens. The communications director, Mia Torres, had been awake all night, her voice raw from interviews. "Governor, the narrative's out of control. We need a statement before the department spins this as non-compliance." Marcus stood by the window, still in silence. He hadn't slept. The sunlight through the glass was too clean, too false. "Let them talk first," he said. "I want to see who defends it." Mia hesitated. "Sir, this isn't politics anymore. It's personal." He turned, eyes cold. "That's exactly why it matters." Across town, Officer Derek Lang sat hunched over his kitchen table, uniform jacket crumpled on the floor. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from friends, superiors, reporters, all variations of disbelief. "What were you thinking? You're finished. Delete your social media, man." He turned on the TV. His own face filled the screen, paused mid-sneer, rain dripping from his hat brim. Underneath, a banner scrolled, "Governor Hale incident sparks nationwide outrage." Lang slammed the remote down. "They're twisting it," he muttered to the empty room. "They always twist it." But even he could hear the hollow in his voice. Meanwhile, in the state capitol, the Attorney General held an emergency meeting. "We can't ignore this," she said, voice taut. "Every news outlet is calling it racial profiling. The governor's silence is making it worse." Mia cut in via speakerphone. "The governor's silence is deliberate. He's letting the truth speak first." On the third floor, Marcus met privately with his chief of staff, Henry Cole, a man who had been with him since the campaign days. "They're demanding a press conference," Henry said. "You could end this narrative with one sentence." Marcus didn't respond. He looked at the paused footage again, his own soaked figure, backlit by flashing red and blue. "End it," he finally said. "Henry, this is the narrative. This is the country, caught on camera." Henry exhaled slowly. "You're thinking long-term again." "I'm thinking truthfully." Marcus turned toward him. "We've written laws, passed bills, funded training programs, and none of it stopped that man from seeing me as a suspect instead of a citizen." Henry's voice softened. "You're not just a citizen, Marcus. You're the governor." Marcus looked out the window. Exactly. And it still wasn't enough. Outside, the protests began by noon. Crowds gathered around the Capitol steps, young, old, black, white, holding signs that read "Justice for Hale" and "Accountability Now." Reporters shouted questions over the noise. "Governor, do you plan to sue the department? Do you believe this was racially motivated? Are you calling for Officer Lang's resignation?" Marcus walked past them without a word. Cameras flashed. The silence became its own statement. By evening, the police department released a formal press statement. The officers involved acted within standard procedural bounds. The identity of the individual was not immediately verifiable at the scene. The department regrets the misunderstanding and has initiated an internal review. The word misunderstanding ignited the internet. Commentators called it tone-deaf. Activists called it predictable. Lang's name leaked online by midnight, and with it came a wave of fury. His home address, his photos, his entire career dissected in real time. In his apartment, Lang scrolled through the storm of condemnation. His face, frozen, mid-arrest, had become a symbol. Strangers called for his badge, some for worse. His wife had stopped answering calls. He whispered into the noise, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." But intent didn't matter anymore. Impact had already taken root. Back in the mansion, Lena Hales stood in the doorway of her husband's study, arms folded. You can't just wait this out, Marcus. People are angry for you. He met her gaze, exhaustion layered behind his calm. I know. Then speak to them. Don't let the department define what happened. He looked down at the wet, wrinkled papers he'd kept from that night, the official documents that had spilled onto the pavement. One corner still bore the muddy imprint of Lang's boot. I will, he said quietly. But not today. She frowned. Why not? Because today, I want them to see the system speak for itself, and hear how it sounds when it lies. Outside, the chants from protesters grew louder, echoing across the city. No justice, no peace. Inside, Marcus closed his laptop. The media could keep the noise for now. He was playing for something deeper, not outrage, but truth revealed under pressure. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning to take shape. The governor's mansion was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Every television in the house was muted, but the news scrolled everywhere. Marcus's name, the precinct, the rain, the words, racial profiling. In the study, a handful of advisors gathered around the long oak table, laptops open, coffee untouched. The air carried the weight of restraint, anger wrapped in professionalism. Mia Torres broke the silence first. We're past crisis management. This is narrative reclamation. Henry nodded grimly. Half the state's waiting for you to speak, Marcus. The other half's waiting for you to slip. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes on the folder in front of him. Internal Affairs Preliminary Report. It was thin. Too thin. They've already called it a misunderstanding, he said. They didn't even use the words stop or arrest, Mia added. They said temporary detainment. Lena entered quietly, carrying a mug of tea that had gone cold. She didn't sit. Her eyes were sharp, steady. You're being polite to people who would have left you in that cell all night if a teenager hadn't filmed it. Mia glanced at her, uneasy. Mrs. Hale, no, Lena said. You all talk like strategists. I'm talking like someone who watched her husband shoved against a car for being alive in his own skin. Marcus looked up at her, expression unreadable. You think I should go on the offensive? I think you should go human. The word cut the room in half. Henry sighed. She's right. You know, people don't need another polished statement. They need the man they voted for to feel what they feel. Marcus rubbed his temple, fatigue deepening the lines on his face. And if the man they voted for loses his composure on live television, what then? They'll see the truth, Lena said softly. You bleed like they do. He stood, pacing slowly to the window. Outside, rain had turned to mist, and the protest banners still waved on the street below. His reflection blurred against the glass. The governor, the black man, the father. He couldn't tell which one the world would see when he spoke. Asterisk. Do you know what I was thinking in that cell? He said quietly. That if I weren't who I am, no one would care what happened. Mia lowered her eyes. That's true. That's the sickness, Marcus continued. That the system only listens when it hurts someone powerful enough to be heard. Silence fell. The words weren't meant for comfort. Henry finally said, You want to do more than survive this. You want to dismantle it. Marcus nodded once, piece by piece. Lena stepped closer, her voice calm but burning underneath. Then stop waiting. Every hour you're silent, they get to frame this as an overreaction. He turned to her. If I speak now, they'll say I'm angry. Let them, she said. You are. He studied her, the tremor behind her strength, the exhaustion of someone who had endured too much grace. He reached for her hand, briefly, grounding himself. Then he turned to his team. Draft a statement. No scripts, no slogans, just truth. Mia started typing. Truth as in what you experienced, or truth as in what the system hides? Both, Marcus said. Let them overlap until people can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Henry exhaled. This'll set off a firestorm. Marcus looked at him, calm, returning like armor. Good. Maybe it's time something actually burned. Lena moved toward the doorway, pausing before she left. When you speak, Marcus, don't talk like a governor. Talk like a man who almost disappeared behind glass because someone didn't see his humanity. He nodded. That's exactly who I am. Later that night, after the team left, Marcus sat alone in the dim office. Files lay scattered across the desk, body cam reports, training manuals, state budgets, the machinery of governance, cold, procedural, indifferent. He opened one drawer and took out an old photograph. His first campaign rally, the crowd behind him, hands raised, hope unbroken. He barely recognized the man smiling back. His phone buzzed a text from Lena. "They need your voice tomorrow." He typed back, "They'll get more than that." Outside, the mist thickened, blurring the city lights. Inside, the silence felt deliberate, the calm before a deliberate storm. The press conference began at noon. Inside, a marble-floored auditorium packed with cameras, reporters, and murmuring officials. Every seat was filled, every lens pointed forward. At the podium stood Police Chief Robert Maddox, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, with the confidence of a man used to controlling rooms. His hands gripped the sides of the podium like a barrier. "First," he began, voice smooth, rehearsed, "I want to assure the public that our department takes any incident involving use of authority seriously." The first flashbulb went off. He blinked, continued. "The officer involved in the recent traffic stop did not recognize Governor Hale at the time. There was no malicious intent, only a procedural error." Marcus watched from his office, silent, a small TV flickering across the room. Lena sat across from him, arms crossed, jaw tight. Maddox went on. "We regret the misunderstanding. The officer has been placed on temporary administrative leave pending review." Lena's hand slammed against the armrest. "Misunderstanding? He slammed you against a car." Marcus's eyes stayed on the screen. "He's not defending the officer," he murmured. "He's defending the institution." On screen, a reporter called out, "Chief Maddox, why wasn't Governor Hale's identity verified before detainment?" Maddox's smile tightened. "Procedures were followed appropriately given the circumstances. We're cooperating with the governor's office to ensure this doesn't distract from the department's service to the community." A masterclass in sanitized language, all apology, no responsibility. Lena rose. "You're going to let that stand?" Marcus muted the TV. "Not yet." Across town, Officer Derek Lang sat inside the Internal Affairs office. The blinds were closed, the room stale with coffee and anxiety. An investigator pressed record on a small black device. "Officer Lang, state your version of events." Lang swallowed. "I initiated a stop on a suspicious vehicle at 11:42 p.m. The driver appeared nervous, refused to show ID. The investigator's expression didn't move. Governor Hale's report says otherwise." Lang's eyes flickered. "Look, it was dark, rainy, he was evasive. Did he threaten you?" "No." "Did he resist?" Lang hesitated. "Not exactly." The investigator leaned forward. "So he complied." Lang's throat bobbed. "Yes." The silence that followed was suffocating. The recorder ticked quietly. Back in the mansion, Marcus's communications team gathered again. Mia read from her notes. "The department's language is consistent. They're framing it as procedural confusion, not profiling." Translation, Henry muttered. "They're saying you looked guilty enough to justify the stop." Marcus leaned back, voice quiet but razor. "They're saying my existence in that neighborhood was suspicious." Mia looked at him carefully. "You could call for Maddox's resignation. That would make him a scapegoat," Marcus said. "This isn't one man's rot, it's structural. You cut one head, 3 more grow back." Lena spoke softly, then exposed the roots. He met her eyes. "That's the plan." He stood, straightened his tie, and walked toward the camera setup the media team had prepared in the next room. The backdrop was plain. No flags, no seal, no theatrics. When the live feed began, Marcus faced the nation not as a politician, but as a man speaking from the wound itself. "Last week," he began, "I was stopped, searched, and handcuffed by those sworn to protect." His tone was steady. "Stripped of theatrics, I was not belligerent. I was not violent. I was not recognized, and that, perhaps, is the heart of it." He paused. Silence filled the space like gravity. "I have spent my career fighting for systems to be fair. But fairness cannot exist where perception itself is poisoned." The feed cut to Maddox's face on monitors across the city, motionless. Tight, dash-lipped, but Marcus continued. "This isn't about one officer. It's about every unchecked bias written into the margins of our institutions. I will not call for one resignation. I will call for reform that leaves no place to hide." He ended the address there. No dramatic exit, no applause, just a still frame of his expression, sharp with conviction. When the cameras stopped, no one in the room spoke. Lena exhaled, slow and deep. "You didn't shout," she said. "No," Marcus replied. "I didn't need to." That evening, Chief Maddox met with city council members behind closed doors. The transcript of Marcus's speech played on his tablet, each line a quiet indictment. One councilman muttered, "He just declared war without raising his voice." Maddox shut the tablet. Then we better hope the walls hold. But even he knew, the walls were already cracking. The state capitol buzzed like an exposed wire. News vans lined the marble steps. Reporters gathered in flocks, clutching mics and recording devices. Every conversation carried the same pulse. The hearing. Inside, the chamber filled with lawmakers, journalists, and citizens. Cameras rolled. The governor's nameplate gleamed at the witness table. Marcus Hale. He sat composed, dressed in a charcoal suit, the kind that said authority without effort. His expression was unreadable, controlled, deliberate. Across from him sat a panel of legislators, with Chief Maddox positioned at the end of the table. His uniform was pristine, his jaw tense. The chairwoman struck the gavel. This hearing is now in session. We are here to examine the events of last Friday night, the unlawful detainment of Governor Hale. The murmurs fell silent. Governor Hale, she began, we understand you wish to make an opening statement. Marcus leaned toward the microphone. I do. The microphones picked up every breath. 5 nights ago, he said, I was pulled over, detained, and handcuffed. I complied fully. I identified myself. None of that stopped the presumption of guilt. My title didn't matter, because my skin spoke first. A collective inhale rippled across the room. Maddox's eyes flickered downward. This was not an isolated era, Marcus continued. This was a reflection of training, oversight, and systemic indifference. My experience was just a more visible version of what many endure in silence. He folded his hands, letting the weight of the words sink in. I am not seeking vengeance. I am seeking transparency. I want a full audit of the department's conduct, its complaint history, its disciplinary outcomes. We cannot reform what we refuse to examine. The chairwoman nodded. Thank you, Governor Hale. She turned to Maddox. Chief Maddox, your response. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. Governor Hale's experience was regrettable, but it does not represent the integrity of the men and women in uniform. The officer involved made a judgment call under uncertain conditions. Uncertain, Marcus interjected. I gave him my license, my registration, and told him who I was. What was uncertain? Maddox hesitated. The cameras zoomed in. I mean, uncertain in terms of situational awareness, sir. Marcus leaned forward. Situational awareness should not mean racial profiling. A murmur of approval echoed through the audience. The chairwoman raised a hand for silence. Chief Maddox, she pressed, was this officer disciplined for prior misconduct? Maddox's pause was his answer. Yes, he finally said. There were previous complaints. How many? 3. And were any upheld? None formally. The chairwoman's brow arched. None. Maddox nodded stiffly. Marcus spoke again, voice calm but cutting. So a man with 3 complaints walked free to stop whoever looked uncertain to him. That's not enforcement. That's roulette. The chamber broke into low, tense whispers. Later, in the hallway, reporters swarmed as Marcus exited the chamber. Flashbulbs strobed against his face. Governor Hale, do you plan to file civil charges? Will you demand Maddox's resignation? Is this political? He didn't stop. It's structural, he said, walking straight through the noise. Meanwhile, Maddox retreated to his office, pacing. His assistant stood near the door, unsure whether to speak. He finally muttered, he's not just fighting me. He's dismantling the narrative, sir. The one that says, we're the heroes no matter what we do. The assistant said nothing. Maddox rubbed his temples. Get me the union rep. I need to know who's leaking. But there was no leak. There was exposure. That night, the footage from the hearing trended across every platform. Clips of Marcus's calm defiance went viral. My title didn't matter, because my skin spoke first. Comment sections flooded with outrage, admiration, fear. The nation divided itself along the same old lines. Disbelief on one side, vindication on the other. Lena scrolled through the coverage, her phone glowing against the dark. You didn't just testify, she said quietly. You turned the mirror around. Marcus stood at the window, looking out at the Capitol lights, and now everyone has to see themselves in it. At 2 a.m., a message pinged on Maddox's private phone. Anonymous number. He's not the only one with evidence. Check your locker room footage from last month. He stared at it, expression draining of color. His reflection stared back from the dark glass of the office window. Something larger was moving now, something beyond him. Morning came like a reckoning. The city woke to flashing headlines, breaking news banners, and the low murmur of disbelief spilling from every cafe and living room. New evidence surfaces. Inhale arrest. Controversy. Leaked police footage suggests pattern of racial misconduct. Marcus watched from his office, the screen reflecting in his coffee cup. He hadn't authorized the leak, but he didn't need to. Truth had momentum now. The footage, grainy but clear, showed Chief Maddox in a locker room 2 weeks earlier, laughing with subordinates as one officer mimicked a traffic stop gone wrong. The punchline, a mock governor with darkened skin tone and hands raised. The laughter, unmistakable. The words, some of them just don't learn. By 9 a.m., the clip had spread everywhere. Inside the precinct, chaos rippled like fire through dry brush. Phones rang nonstop. Officers whispered in corners. Maddox's door slammed shut, blinds drawn. He barked orders into the phone. Find out who leaked that footage, now. Sir, it came from an anonymous cloud upload. No traceable metadata. Someone inside did this, he roared. No one else had access. His deputy swallowed hard. Chief, the union's calling for a separate investigation. Internal affairs too. Maddox froze. On me. Yes, sir. They said it's a matter of credibility. He dropped into his chair, breath shaking. The walls of authority that had shielded him for decades were beginning to crumble, and they were doing it live. On camera, across town, Marcus sat with his communications director, Lena, and state attorney, Daniel. We stay quiet, Daniel said. Let the system eat itself for once. Marcus didn't answer. His mind wasn't on strategy. It was on the faces in that locker room. Men sworn to protect, mocking the people they swore to serve. Lena looked up from her tablet. Governor, the public's demanding action. They want firings, indictments, reforms, and they'll get them, Marcus said softly, but not as spectacle, as correction. By noon, the press conference began. Marcus stood at the podium, dozens of cameras aimed at him. His tone was even, but his words cut clean. I did not release this footage, but I will not condemn those who exposed it. They've forced transparency in a place that worships secrecy. He paused. Every flashbulb stilled. This is not about one officer. This is about a culture that dehumanizes before it listens. About a system where apology is policy and accountability is optional. He glanced directly into the nearest camera. The badge should never be a mask. At that exact hour, Maddox's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same anonymous number. You buried 3 complaints. We have the files. Check the union drive. He clicked the link. Documents loaded, reports, timestamps, signatures, every complaint he'd suppressed over the years, every officer he'd quietly protected. He slammed his laptop shut. Too late. Within minutes, journalists began posting screenshots. The internet detonated. Hail hearing #justice in uniform, #Maddox files. The governor didn't need to speak further. The evidence did the talking. Later that evening, Marcus returned home. The house was quiet. Lena had left early, the staff dismissed for privacy. He stood in his living room, still in his suit, staring at the muted TV replaying his own face. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown contact. You won, but winning doesn't fix what they broke. He stared at it, unreadable. Maybe it was true. Maybe victory was just another form of exhaustion. He poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and let silence fill the room. For the first time in days, there were no cameras, no statements, no protocols, just him and the weight of what justice demanded across town. Maddox's office was dark except for the flicker of a single monitor. The chief sat alone, scrolling through headlines that reduced his legacy to fragments. Maddox under federal investigation. Governor Hale's case triggers statewide reform bill. He leaned back, eyes bloodshot, breathing shallow. For decades, he had believed the system protected its own, but the system only protected power, and power had changed hands. His phone rang again. He didn't answer. He knew the call was from internal affairs. He turned off the monitor. For the first time, the silence in his office felt like judgment. Outside, the city moved on. Protesters filled the streets, not in rage but in unity. Signs lifted high. We see you. Accountability isn't revenge. No one above the law. Marcus watched from the balcony of the governor's mansion. Flashlights flickered like stars below. Lena joined him. It's not over, she said. It never is, he replied. The wind carried the chants up to where he stood, steady, rhythmic, alive. He looked down at his hands, the same ones that had been cuffed days ago, and whispered, let them never forget. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By Monday morning, the state attorney general announced an official inquiry into the police department's conduct. The headlines came like hammer blows. Chief Maddox placed on administrative leave. Governor Haley signs emergency oversight. Bill department records seized by federal investigators. The city buzzed with a new kind of energy. Not celebration, not chaos, but reckoning. In the precinct, officers avoided eye contact. The corridors that once echoed with confidence now felt hollow. Maddox entered through the back entrance, escorted by 2 internal affairs officers. His desk had been cleared. The nameplate was gone. Chief Maddox, one of them said, "You're to surrender your badge and service weapon." He froze, the words hitting with a finality he hadn't imagined possible. "After 32 years, sir, procedure." His fingers trembled as he unpinned the badge. The metal felt heavier than it ever had before, a lifetime of authority condensed into one cold emblem. He placed it on the desk and stepped back. The officer sealed it in a plastic bag. "Thank you, sir." No handshake, no farewell, just silence. Meanwhile, at the governor's office, Marcus sat in a strategy meeting. Papers covered the conference table: reform drafts, data audits, community oversight proposals. Lena scrolled through live coverage on her tablet. "They're calling it the Hale effect," she said. Marcus frowned. "Don't turn this into branding. It's not your doing," Daniel said. "It's public momentum. People finally see the structure for what it is." Marcus looked out the window at the Capitol courtyard, filled again with protesters and supporters alike. He thought of every face that had been stopped, dismissed, or erased. "We'll turn it into law, not legend," he said. By late afternoon, Maddox sat in his car, parked outside the precinct he had ruled for years. Through the windshield, he could see the new interim chief, a black woman, addressing reporters. Her words carried clear through the hum of microphones. "This department will no longer tolerate silence as policy. We will build trust, not intimidation." Each word was a mirror held up to him. He turned off the engine and sat in the quiet. The city outside moved forward. He remained in the past. For the first time, he saw his reflection not as command, but as consequence. He had always thought authority made him untouchable. Now, stripped of it, he was just another man the system had used and discarded when inconvenient. That night, Marcus drove without escort for the first time in months. He stopped near the community center where his father once worked, a low brick building with flickering streetlights and peeling paint. Inside, volunteers were sorting donations. A few recognized him and froze. "Governor Hay," one whispered. He smiled faintly. "Just Marcus tonight." They showed him the new youth initiative board. Photos, names, small stories. "We're trying to get funding to expand," one said nervously. "You'll have it," Marcus promised. "No red tape this time." As he left, one of the volunteers, an older woman, stopped him at the door. "My grandson was arrested last year for walking home from school. They said he matched a description." Marcus met her gaze. "That's going to change." "I hope you mean it, son," she said softly, "because they've said it before." The words stayed with him long after he drove away. The following morning, national media announced Maddox's resignation. He didn't appear before cameras. No statement, just a single line emailed to local press. "I accept responsibility for my failure to uphold the standards of my office." But for many, it wasn't enough. Civil rights groups demanded prosecution. Protesters gathered outside the precinct again, chanting his name, not in anger this time, but in warning. Lena read the statement aloud in Marcus's office. "It's sterile," she said. "It's survival," Marcus replied. "He's negotiating his fall." Daniel looked up. "You think he'll testify?" "He'll have to," Marcus said. "The system he built is collapsing, and everyone who helped build it will start trading truth for immunity." 3 days later, Maddox did testify quietly, under oath. He admitted to covering multiple complaints, including one that might have prevented the governor's arrest. When the transcript became public, it confirmed what many already knew. The system didn't malfunction. It functioned as designed. Marcus stood at the podium once more. The crowd below was silent, waiting. "This is not closure," he said. "This is recognition. We can't rebuild until we stop pretending the foundation was sound." He paused, looking out over the steps of the Capitol, the same place he'd once been, humiliated. "Justice isn't a finish line. It's maintenance." The words echoed against the stone walls, carried by the wind into the listening crowd. The city breathed differently now. What had once been tension was now reflection, a strange calm in the aftermath of exposure. The streets still bore protest marks. The courthouse still had barriers stacked at its base, but something fundamental had shifted. People looked one another in the eye again. Marcus walked through the rotunda of the state capitol, the sound of his footsteps echoing beneath the dome. Every meeting room he passed was full. Community leaders, activists, officers, legal advisors. Reform wasn't a headline anymore. It was an agenda. Lena caught up to him with a file in hand. The oversight bill passed the Senate committee this morning. It's heading to a full vote next week. He nodded. And the funding provision. Unanimous support. Even Maddox's allies flipped. Marcus stopped walking. Good. That means it's real. At a press conference later that day, cameras surrounded him again, but this time, the questions were different. Governor Hale, do you believe true reform is possible? Has this experience changed how you see law enforcement? Do you forgive Chief Maddox? He paused at that last one. The microphones edged closer. I don't have to forgive him, Marcus said. That's between him and the mirror. My role is to make sure no one else suffers what I did or worse. The room went silent. The statement traveled across the airwaves within minutes, dissected by analysts, replayed by talk shows, quoted by editorials. For Marcus, it wasn't rhetoric. It was closure shaped into law. Meanwhile, in a modest house outside the city, Maddox sat in his living room, blinds drawn. The television murmured low. The governor's voice carried faintly through static. He hadn't been arrested, though the investigation wasn't over. He knew it could come any day, but worse than any charge was the public's verdict. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You taught me everything I shouldn't become. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He recognized the number, one of his former officers, the same one who had leaked the footage. He leaned back, eyes heavy. Guess that's justice too, he muttered. That evening, Marcus attended a small memorial event at the local community hall. It was for victims of wrongful police violence, families, survivors, neighbors. When he arrived, the crowd quieted. An old woman took the microphone. We used to pray for someone to see us, she said. Now we pray they don't just see, they act. Marcus stood with his hands folded, the words settling like weight on his shoulders. A young man approached afterward. Governor Hale, I'm training for the academy next year, he said nervously. But after everything that's happened, I don't know if I should still do it. Marcus studied him, early 20s, determined, uncertain. Then you're exactly who should, Marcus said quietly. Change only sticks when people like you walk into those rooms and refuse to look away. The young man nodded slowly, as if a decision had been made right there at home that night. Marcus sat by his window again. The city lights shimmered across the horizon. He pulled out the same letter he had written the night after his arrest, the one he'd never sent, never shown anyone. He read the first line aloud to himself. You don't see me, but you fear me. He folded it again, placed it in a drawer. Maybe now, he whispered, they finally see. In a quieter corner of the city, Maddox drove past the precinct one last time. His face was lined with exhaustion. The sign above the door had been replaced. City Police Department, Community Accountability Division. He parked for a moment, watching as officers greeted citizens outside, handing out flyers for a new mentorship program. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, only distance. He had built the old structure. Now he was watching the new one rise over its ashes. He put the car in gear, eyes lingering for a final second. Do better, he murmured to no one. Then, he drove off. A week later, the oversight bill passed unanimously. Standing ovations erupted across the chamber floor. Marcus didn't smile, not from pride, but from relief. Lena whispered beside him. It's done. He shook his head. It's started. The chamber quieted as he rose to speak. This isn't about redemption, he said. It's about endurance. Every system built on silence eventually collapses. The real work is in what we build afterward. He glanced at the reporters. And make no mistake, we're not finished. That night, a cool wind swept through the city. Protest signs leaned forgotten against fences. The same streets that had once echoed with chants now shimmered with quiet traffic. In his office, Marcus turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow from the window. He looked at his reflection. A man changed but not undone. He thought of the cuffs, the flash of blue lights, the laughter in the locker room, the courtroom applause. All of it had led here, not to power, but to clarity. He whispered a final line to himself. Not for cameras, not for speeches, just truth. Justice doesn't erase pain. It proves we were right to feel it. He stood for a moment longer, then walked out, leaving the office dark behind him. That evening, as dusk fell, Marcus sat alone in his study. The city outside glowed orange beneath the setting sun. Lena knocked once, then entered quietly. "They're saying you restored faith in leadership," she said. He shook his head. "Faith shouldn't depend on one man. If it does, we haven't learned anything." She nodded. Still, it mattered. He looked up, the faintest trace of fatigue softening his expression. "It costs something too." They said nothing more. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. Across the city, Maddox packed the last box from his office. He paused before turning out the light, staring at the empty room. For years, he had walked these halls with pride. Now, every step echoed with the memory of silence he once demanded from others. He left the building without ceremony. As the door closed behind him, the precinct clock struck midnight, a quiet punctuation to a man's long, slow undoing. 6 months later, the city had changed. Not completely, no city ever does, but the air carried something new. Accountability. The checkpoints were fewer, the complaints handled faster, the officers more cautious. What had once been whispered was now written into policy. Governor Marcus Hale stood before a mirror in his office, adjusting his tie. The evening sunlight poured through the tall windows, laying gold across the floor. Behind him, Lena read from a stack of papers. "The Civil Oversight Commission's first report is ready," she said. "Complaint resolutions up by 60%. Use of force incidents down by 35%. Marcus nodded. "Numbers don't fix pain, but they show movement." "They also show hope," she replied. "And that matters." He turned from the mirror. "Hope's a fragile thing. It dies when people start thinking progress is permanent." Lena smiled faintly. "Then we'll remind them." Across town, the old precinct building stood under new signage and leadership. The once feared corridors now buzzed with open conversations and community workshops. Photographs of fallen civilians lined one wall, not as shame, but as remembrance. Officer training sessions had been rewritten from the ground up. Biased workshops, de-escalation drills, and accountability boards had replaced hollow slogans about brotherhood. A new recruit, the young man Marcus had met at the memorial, stood at attention during roll call. The new chief, a calm and commanding black woman, addressed the room. "You don't wear this badge to demand respect," she said. "You wear it to earn it, every single day." The young recruit nodded, gripping his cap tighter. For the first time, the uniform didn't feel like power, it felt like responsibility. Meanwhile, in a small suburban house, Thomas Maddox sat on his porch, staring at the horizon. The trial had ended quietly, no jail time, but permanent disqualification from any law enforcement position. He lived alone now. The neighborhood avoided him politely. The local paper had long stopped calling. A newspaper sat folded on his lap. Headline reading, "Hale Administration expands police reform statewide." He sighed, fingers brushing the ink-stained edge. He didn't feel anger anymore, just the weight of history pressing down on his silence. He whispered to himself, "I enforced laws I never understood." A delivery truck rumbled by. Children played down the street. Life continued, indifferent, unbothered. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the faint echo of a siren somewhere in the distance. Not a call for him anymore, but a reminder of what he'd lost. Back at the Capitol, Marcus prepared for a televised address marking the anniversary of the Oversight Bill. The room filled with staffers, journalists, and dignitaries. Cameras pointed, microphones hummed. He began slowly, his tone steady. 1 year ago, this state faced a mirror it didn't want to see. What we found wasn't just prejudice, it was neglect, hidden in policies, wrapped in procedure. We've begun to change that. But the work isn't mine, it's ours. He looked directly into the lens. "I was handcuffed once, not by metal, but by assumption. The moment they saw my skin, I stopped being a citizen and became a suspect. That moment still happens every day to someone else. We can't legislate empathy, but we can legislate fairness, and that's what this fight is about." Silence filled the room. The camera light flicked off. A producer whispered, "Perfect take," but Marcus didn't smile. He turned away, walking toward the window, gazing out at the city whose heartbeat he had helped reset. Later that night, he visited his father's grave for the first time in months. The cemetery was quiet, the wind soft. He knelt, setting a folded copy of the signed oversight bill on the grass. "They tried to humiliate me, Dad," he said softly, "but all they did was reveal themselves." He brushed the dirt from the gravestone. "You told me once, dignity isn't what they give you, it's what you refuse to surrender." "You were right." He sat there for a long time, letting the quiet fill the space between memory and victory. In another part of the city, a candlelight vigil filled the square. Hundreds gathered, not to protest, but to remember. Families held photos of lost sons and daughters. Musicians played softly. Volunteers read out names. When Marcus arrived, the crowd turned and applauded, but he raised his hand gently. "Don't clap for me," he said. "Clap for yourselves. You're the reason they had to listen." An old woman stepped forward, the same one whose grandson had been arrested a year earlier. She handed Marcus a candle. "He's in college now," she said. "You kept your word." Marcus nodded, eyes glinting. "No," he said quietly, "you kept me accountable." As the candles flickered against the night sky, the city lights seemed to blend with them, small flames merging with the glow of a place learning to see itself clearly again. The chants that once roared with anger now rose in calm. Unity. No more fear. No more silence. Marcus stood among them, not as a leader, but as one of many who refused to look away anymore. He looked out over the crowd, over the faces illuminated by soft firelight, and thought of the single truth that had guided him since that night on the roadside. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about visibility. He whispered to himself, "Justice isn't what changes laws, it's what changes sight." The wind moved through the candles, carrying the flames but never extinguishing them, and as the night deepened, the city, flawed, wounded, awakening, kept its quiet promise to stay awake.